But we do have two superstars. We have on my far right, Thom Yorke, global superstar, Radiohead, some bloke, depending which description you want, all of them offered by him. And we have Tony Juniper, global environmental superstar, Friends of the Earth, and now politician, and another bloke. But politician standing for Parliament.
Yes, standing for the Green Party in Cambridge. We're hoping to do some good there in the general election. Could be the first time we will have Greens in the Westminster Parliament. So we've got to do some campaigning between now and then, but we're doing fine, we think, and hopefully can pull it off.
That would liven things up. And can I ask you, Thom, sorry, if I can use your first name, just explain why you're here doing a double act, because I think you're not going to play anything.
No. I'm here to observe, I guess, maybe write something. I had the chance to, thanks to Tony, and I wanted to see what was going on because I've been reading about it and can't figure out. It's quite something, I'd say. And, the way it's been briefed on the outside and what's actually happening on the inside seems to be very two different things.
Can't figure it out, you're not alone in here, and that goes for some of the delegates too. And
I'm trying to figure out where the negotiations are actually happening.
That's the big question. Got any idea, Tony?
Well, I think they're probably happening in lots of different places at once. So there's like several parallel processes going on. There's, the kind of big open meetings, there's the small formal meetings, there's the contact groups, there's of course all these bilaterals going on all over the place, and some of them, taking place in corridors even. It's really difficult to get a handle on the whole shape of it. But I've been here now just for a day, and it's like deja vu going back to Kyoto and before that, and Bali 2 years ago. The same issues are still on the table, being endlessly talked about, and we do need some breakthrough, some sense of urgency now from countries to solve these two main long-standing problems. There's many of them, but there's two really big things here which remain on the table. One is how much people are going to cut, the Western countries in particular. Are we going to get a science-based agreement from here in terms of 25-40% cuts by 2020? And the other thing is the money. It's actually quite straightforward in the end in terms of what the Western countries collectively need to do. They've got to sign up to a decent cut that's going to go below 2 degrees with some certainty, or at least some good chance of that, and they've got to put a lot of money on the table. And Hillary Clinton said something today. Whether it actually is real money or new money remains to be seen. The figure's been said. I don't know if it's going to help that much, but I think that's it in the end. Really, it's a question of leadership, both in terms of reducing the pollution causing the problem, and then putting some cash out there to help other countries do development, but without going through a high carbon phase, and also to do the adaptation.
If you put it like that, they should be able to sort it out in a day.
I would have thought so. It seems pretty straightforward to me.
Well, can I ask you, you've followed the process over many years, I know. In fact, we interviewed you in Poznan too. Are you surprised that this is where we are? After all these years, here we are, day to go, in Copenhagen. We're still fighting over the absolutely basic issues that were basic at the beginning.
Basic at the beginning. These were basic issues in the Rio summit. I remember the negotiations leading up to that in terms of who's going to pay and who's going to cut. And so, nobody should be surprised at what the key issues are. And the Western countries, frankly, for the last 17 years, to different degrees, have been sitting on their hands. They just haven't stepped up to this challenge. Obviously, some of them stand out in terms of the Americans and the Australians, but some others who've been trundling along as though there's no change, building airports, coal-fired power stations, investing in carbon-intensive development, and now suddenly it's all coming home to roost at this point. And, I think some of the things that were being said about the disastrous lack of leadership by some of the Western countries during the 1990s, you can see the effects of it here now in terms of they deeply embedded themselves in a certain kind of industrial development, and they're finding it very hard to get out of it. And they were told this at the time. And so we'll see what we get tomorrow.
What's interesting, because we've just been at a briefing, David Millerman, isn't it? Ed, I knew that. And he was saying how, a lot of these Western countries, they're sitting there and they're talking about 30% cuts, 25% cuts, and then it's actually dawning on them, I think now, that what that actually means in terms of how their economies are going to function. And but to hear him say that, you'd have thought, well, surely you guys probably would have thought about this, at least 3 or 4 years ago, wouldn't you? But it's actually the sort of, the consequences of actually committing to this is for the way that the global economy works now, and how it will work in the future, is pretty radical.
Okay, my colleague Adam Groves is digging my leg with a biro, which is a secret sign to say there's some messages winging their way around Twitter and email.
We've been interviewing people all week, and which had kind of a big response earlier in the week to a girl called Anna, and one of her comments was that there's no art in here, and what a great and miserable place these UN. Even less colour now the NGOs are gone. But I wondered, Thom, as an artist, what kind of role do you think that art and music might have to play in kind of influencing kind of these massive global decisions? Is there any role that it can have?
Well, the brightest thing I've seen since we've been here is the Brazilian flag outside the Brazilian delegates, which is beautiful actually. And then you've got like the American, which is freaking me out because this whole place is exactly like backstage at a festival. So you've got the dressing rooms, you've got like Indonesia's dressing room is a shoebox. You've got the American dressing room is this enormous thing with its own lighting rig and like snazzy displays and shit. Nobody in there. And you've got the Chinese one, extremely austere and severe with a big logo outside. Brilliant. Art, music, influence. I think when you get to this stage, I think that every world leader here, even if they're running a dictatorship, would admit that their population would like them to do something. And that has, to some extent, been down to years and years of artists, musicians, and everybody, like, bringing this up endlessly. I think, but, you know, I think one of the things I find really disgusting is the fact the NGOs have been thrown out, when actually, like you were saying earlier, they're the ones that kept this argument going for years and years and years, you know. Art and music, they do play a part, but they are not, they're non-specific.
I think we all agree about the NGOs being thrown out. I mean, they're apparently thrown out because of lack of organisation and not on their part, but by the authorities who were inundated by prime ministers and presidents and their amazingly large retinues who all turned up unannounced.
Turned up unannounced. Oh, yeah. So they didn't really, like, actually sort of, accidentally miscalculate another 10,000 people that had to get in, so, we're going to have to accidentally throw all these other people out, just at the point where it gets difficult.
He's a little fishy. Can I just ask you, Tony, one of the questions of the moment to Tony Juniper, ex-Friends of the Earth, now standing as MP, is a confidential draft, initial draft from the Secretariat, which is being passed round by email. It's been leaked by someone, which has added up all the pledges by industrialized countries and some promises by developing countries. And essentially, it says, add them all together, do the maths, and what we've got is that we're heading for a temperature rise of around 3 degrees centigrade and 550 parts per million instead of 350 carbon, which is both of them way above the targets that by consensus we're supposed to be heading for. So are you surprised?
No, not at all surprised. It's a transparent situation in terms of looking at what these countries have come with in the different blocks and the different nations in putting out their numbers. It doesn't add up to coming in below 2 degrees. It's at least 3 degrees, I would say. And the IPCC was very clear on this. Need a 25 to 40% cut by 2020 to stand a reasonable chance of coming in below 2 degrees. That's a cut from the developed countries, the Annex 1 parties. So they're not really saying that. The one bloc that is saying it is the EU, but they're saying 20 rather than 30, and they will go to 30 if others step up to the mark. So even they're not saying that they will, commit to a 2-degree temperature emissions reductions pathway. It's disastrous, that this huge chasm still remains between the science and the politics. And, for people listening to this, the difference between 2 and 3 degrees may not sound much, but this is the difference between, meters of sea level rise, the potential loss of the Amazon rainforest, a mass extinction of animals and plants, a rewriting of the world's political map in terms of people moving in order to cope with droughts and loss of livelihoods and so on. So this is a really major difference between what's needed and what we're likely to get. Just to give one impression of 3 degrees. The last time the world was 3 degrees warmer than now was in the Pliocene, in about 3 million years ago. And at that point, there were trees growing on Greenland, and global sea levels were about 10 meters higher than now. And so this is not a small thing that is being kind of lost in this discussion. It's major. And countries should be frankly ashamed of themselves because they can see the danger, and I think the first duty of an elected government is to look after the interests of its citizens, not only next week but also into a reasonable period into the future. And by signing up to what they know is a 3-degree scenario, that is a complete abdication of their responsibilities.
When you said when you referred to an impression of 3 degrees, I thought you were going to do an impression of the 3 degrees. But can I ask you both, maybe Thom Yorke, do you think people are ready, even just anecdotally, friends, people you come into contact with, are ready to make changes in their lifestyle, that they appreciate what this is going to mean for all of us?
I think it's about fairness. If everybody feels that it's been done in a way that everybody has a duty to do it. It's like George Monbiot wrote about it in his book, like a rationing system. I know that wasn't perfect, obviously, but it's that sort of concept. And I think, if we get on with it now, if we put the everything in place now, it will be manageable. If we leave it another, even like 5 years, it won't. If we put a structure in place where it could occur, then people will cope with it.
You agree with that, Tony? Well, you were leading a campaign organisation, so you must have some knowledge about people's views about, okay, they think the cause is good, but are they going to change? Are they ready for that? Do you think people really understand the implications of this?
I think there's quite a lot of things going on in terms of the collective consciousness, and I think it's quite difficult just to paint a very straightforward picture of it, but I just mention a couple of things that I think are happening. I think, as the implications of this are becoming more obvious, I think there's a tendency for people to walk away from it. And so you see some of these polls lately which are talking about, declining confidence in the fact that humans are responsible for this. I don't think it's got anything to do with the science, really. I think it's got much more to do with this dissonance thing which humans experience when on the one hand you're told something that has big implications, and on the other your behaviour is not consistent with dealing with it. And the best way of dealing with that kind of discomfort is to deny there's a problem. And so I think, there's a bit of that creeping in as people hear about sea level rise and food shortages and so on.
But also, if you see, when we started the Friends of the Earth campaign, the first thing that happened was that people say, yeah, but what can I do, da da da, and there's a lot of finger pointing. Oh well, you fly here and you do this here and da da da, and it also, if everything remains on that level where it doesn't, if it isn't a collective decision, then you get the dissonance he's talking about. But if it's a law, if it's a nation, an international decision, it's a different thing. And that's when you get the shift back. You see, basically what's happened is like you still got the people's desire. We all have it that like we're going to wake up tomorrow morning from this really long, vivid dream, and it's just going to be, it's fine, it was just a dream, and it's not going to happen. Okay. So the sooner that someone wakes you up, slaps you around and says, this isn't going to happen, now let's get on with it, the better. And that's it.
I think the other bit of this as well, in this kind of space of getting public support for change, is making a positive picture of what the future could look like. And I think a lot of it is communicated as more tax, less stuff, not going on holiday, when in fact it's not about that at all. And I think, this is one of the things I think the Green Party needs to do, is to paint a very positive picture of how we can live differently. Not live worse, but live better, and a lower carbon world that comes with it.
Okay, we all say yes to that. Well, and thank you very much, Tony Juniper, global environmental superstar, and Thom Yorke, global superstar, and both some bloke. But great. You're going to be on the Stupid Show after this. You're going to be, so you can stay tuned, and you get another bout with the superstar. So thank you very, very much for coming in.